Morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. We're just going to wait a few moments just to allow people to join us.
Hi, Emma. We have a steady number now.
Thank you, Kerry. Hello and good morning to you all. Welcome to our September webinar. We're back after our short August break, ready to bring you our monthly programme of events, training and webinars where we look to give HR managers and leaders the opportunity to hear not only legal updates but also topics which have that horizon scanning nature to them as well. This month I'll be doing something a little different from the usual legal update. I'm going to be talking about the really important subject of the menopause and more specifically what employers need to know and how employers can support their people. I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined today by Dee Murray, who is the founder and CEO of Menopause Experts. Welcome, Dee, to our webinar.
Thank you for having me. Very good morning to everybody.
Thank you very much. And today is going to be a really empowering talk. I'm really excited to hear what Dee has to tell us and how Menopause Experts is really shaking up this topic as well. Those of us who've joined our webinars before, you're probably thinking we're looking a little different when you look at the slides. Yes, we have had a brand change of colour and a change of logo. So if you like what you see, it'd be really great if you could pop something in the chat. But I think it looks fantastic and it's really great to be able to share our new brand and slides and logo with you today. So Dee, it would be great if you could just give us a bit of background about yourself, a bit of background about Menopause Experts and how you came to set it all up.
Yes, absolutely. Good morning, everybody. I'm live from France, so I'm an hour ahead of you. Now, it has several advantages. One, I'm closer to lunchtime than you are, and I reach the weekend an hour sooner too, apart from the beautiful scenery. But it's lovely to be talking about my favourite subject. I mean, this is something that I eat, sleep and breathe and experience 7 days a week. We set up Menopause Experts primarily to help women who feel really under-supported when going through menopause. And it won't have escaped your attention that menopause is headline news and has been now for about a year or two. And that's thanks in part to companies like ours. We shout it from the rooftops. We've got an awful lot of PR going on. We're in the newspapers, we're in magazines. We're wanting to make menopause as a word a mainstream word. I mean, there are a lot of people that are trying to change the word and rename it, you know, like a hormonal deficiency disease. I mean, it's utter nonsense. Menopause itself basically just means it's when women finish having their periods, they become post-reproductive, and in layman's terms, we run out of eggs. And I'll talk about eggs a little bit later. But we're not chickens, we don't keep reproducing them. So I'm going to just talk about that because that does come up as a myth quite often. So going through my own perimenopause I'm going to talk to a bit later. This is the lead up. Now, this is probably one of the most significant times of the menopause journey that women will go through, because it's not a short phase. For some, it's a year or two, but for other women, it can last up to 10 years. So we're not talking about something that happens over a period of months, you know, not like pregnancy. We can't set our watches by this. It's not 9 months. It can be nine years of perimenopause leading up to postmenopause, as it's called. And that is the time when women are still having periods, though they could be irregular. Our estrogen levels, the female hormone, is significantly reducing day by day, and we move into that post-reproduction. Now, that is the time when women experience the most severe symptoms. It's the most symptomatic phase. And I do want you to remember that as I'm speaking, because quite often even women don't understand that they're going through perimenopause, because they believe, because of what we've been taught or not taught over our lifetime, menopause is all about no periods, that's when your periods stop. It's not, okay? There is this long lead up time. So we've put in place resources and support. We have some free resources like magazine and training for women, but we also work very closely with companies as well. I'm an employer. 99% of my employees are menopausal, and that includes the men as well. I can talk about that another time. So I have to be aware of how they're experiencing their symptoms and the impact that it has on their day-to-day life in the workplace. So that's why I'm very keen to talk on webinars like this. It'll be uplifting, it'll be empowering, you'll learn something new, I'm sure, but it'll also better position you at work with colleagues. If you're an employer, you'll just understand the law a bit better, you know, how you can protect yourself as an employer, because after all, we have to protect our businesses, okay? We've got to protect our reputation. We need to retain our staff. Some of them will have incredible experience, so we don't want to see them go. But we also need to make sure that we're caring and we're compassionate, don't we? Because otherwise our team will leave anyway, because they'll go and work for somebody who is caring and compassionate at times when they most need it. Absolutely. So that's pretty much in a nutshell what we do. There is more besides, but we don't have time to go into everything. But menopause is our thing. That's our gig. That's what we do. We talk about it all the time, and it's to make it a mainstream subject that women can then feel much more relaxed about talking and opening up, and therefore you get, you know, you get better results from your employees. They have a happier life at home, feel more supported in every aspect. That's the aim, and that's what we're doing.
No, brilliant. And I think I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of those legal issues later on in our session today. But before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping. As Dee has told you, we are live and we are recording the session, so you will be sent a YouTube link afterwards. So those of you who are joining us on YouTube, brilliant, great to know that you're using our YouTube channel. But again, please do share this with your colleagues as well. As with all our webinars, they are a general discussion, and with anything that's a general discussion and an overview, if you have any specific medical or legal questions, then you must take your own specific advice. And at the end of this, we've got our contact details there, but I'll be sending you information about menopause experts and how you can get involved. For those of you who don't know Boyce Turner, we are a commercial law firm in the Thames Valley. We support global clients in the UK, clients across Europe. In the employment team, we deal with HR issues, litigation, immigration, and training and learning and development. So if you need any help or support, then please do get in touch. So to our topic today. I think you'll agree that the topic of menopause is becoming, you know, a little bit more mainstream. I've been seeing articles, certainly there's been TV programs. I even saw an advert the other night for sanitary products that was talking about the menopause. And we've also seen an increase in our court cases as well, where menopause has been cited. I also read this week that the House of Commons Women and Equalities Committee has launched an inquiry to see how menopause is affecting women in the workplace, looking at whether we need to change our discrimination laws, looking at workplace practices, see whether there needs to be any legislative change in this area. So this topic is also getting parliamentary attention as well. We're going to hear some stats from Dee, but just to sort of put this webinar into context and why I think it's really important that we do talk about this topic, and particularly employers, is that there are approximately 13 million women in the UK who are peri or post-menopausal. And Dee, you know, when we think about, you know, we've seen the Davina McCall programme, we've seen articles, you know, when we see it sort of coming up in sort of parliamentary committees, do you think people are talking about this topic, or do you think there's still an element of taboo about it?
Oh, it's only just started. I mean, really, if you looked at it as a person, it's probably just about got up on its feet and toddling around the room. It's still very, very new. I was talking to you before we started this conversation. I had quite a shocking conversation with somebody I was introduced to only yesterday, a female director who started the conversation reading out women in the workplace, even though she is a woman in the workplace, but she's an employer. And she felt that actually it was, we shouldn't be bending over backwards. Women should pull themselves together, and it's only menopause and hot flushes. And why should we make all these changes? Why should it disrupt the workplace just for that one woman? Which is quite alarming to me, actually. There's a level of ignorance there. I'm not one for blame culture. I'm really not. It is what it is. We're only starting to learn about this now. So women are only really starting to recognise their own symptoms and what they're going through. We still have to drag women to our training sessions. We still have to convince women to invest enough time in themselves to actually learn about what's happening to their bodies and their psychology, because this does affect their psychology as well. So if we have to do that for women who are experiencing menopause, imagine then what we have to do with everybody else. We've got to influence people to start learning about what menopause is, how it affects a woman's life, but then how it impacts on work and home.
Absolutely.
And families and friendships and all relationships, because it's so far reaching. She doesn't suffer it on her own. There are lots of other people around her as well. So yes, it's definitely something that we're going to have to keep banging the drum. We've got to do more webinars like this. Companies need to sit up and listen. You do, because the law is changing. It is becoming much more widely recognised, and nobody wants to end up in a tribunal. For starters, you don't really want to end up losing that member of staff. If they're valuable to you, or you remember them being valuable to you, why would you want to lose them when actually you could put some simple processes? And we're not talking about spending fortunes here. We're talking about, a couple of £1,000 for a robust menopause policy, possibly, that's bespoke to your company, and making some common sense changes in the workplace. That's all we're talking about. It's common sense practice. So we're not trying to rewrite history. It's not company bosses that are at fault here, because you don't know. Okay, you didn't know, but there's no excuses now, because you can learn. So that's why I'm here.
I think I'm just going to read out some statistics, and I know we'll have a look at some statistics later, but statistically, 1 in 4 women will experience the really severe and debilitating symptoms. And 2/3 of women say that a lack of support and understanding, that they have a lack of understanding and support at work. And that's a huge number. And although menopause is not age related, and I think that's really important for people to understand as well, but the significant proportion of women are between the ages of 45 and 55. And I was really interested to read that is the largest age demographic in our workforces. So when we think about the effects of menopause and the symptoms that Dee's going to talk about, it is a really big deal for employers, and particularly when I talk about some of the legal risks as well. So I think that, it's a really great opportunity for employers to really, take on board, really think about how they can create those inclusive workplaces, those workplaces which really have empathy at their heart. And Dee, I know you work with a number of organisations, really high profile organisations, but why do you think there is this barrier to talking about menopause and how it impacts on people at work?
I think it's a lack of education. It's just something. I mean, if you go back a few decades, really, we're not going too far back here. Pregnancy was a taboo subject.
Yes.
We couldn't openly talk about having babies. Go a little bit further back, men could never be present at births. okay, because it was the messy end and they didn't need to be there. Now you've got people YouTubing their birthing, they're videoing it. Periods, talking about periods. In fact, if you think about women's issues, I mean, I really don't like using that phrase because it's not just women's issues, but if you think about women's health, there have been so many taboos surrounding women's health for eternity, really. You know, it just seems that we can't talk about it because it's embarrassing. Well, it shouldn't be embarrassing. And actually, you're going to improve your health. You could save someone's life if these topics are openly discussed. So far from being embarrassing, they're actually empowering, educational. Education empowers people. Giving people information and the right information about their own bodies means that they could save their own lives, potentially. Okay, we've got an NHS that's bursting at the seams. We all need to do our bit and look after ourselves better. But we can only do that through education, can't we? We only know what we know. So I think just everybody, and I'm an absolute advocate for everybody should know about this. This isn't just a woman's issue.
No.
Everyone should be educated. You know, you'll have a mother, a sister, a daughter. You'll work with women in the workplace. So you're likely to have a colleague. You may even sit next to someone who's having hot flushes throughout the day, who could really benefit from either moving her desk to the window or having a desk fan, or just courteously, you know, a member of the team providing or going grabbing her a nice chilled glass of water. You know, sometimes it's just putting those practices in the workplace. It makes a huge difference to these women. They're not swinging the lead. They're not trying to get off work. You know, most women that are going through this will have been very, very conscientious workers. And particularly if they're midlife, you know, we come from a generation where generally we want to work hard. We're very proactive, so you don't want to lose these people. So you know, that's why it's got to be talked about. And as you rightly said, about 80% of the work of menopausal women are still in the workforce. And most women, and this is something that's quite alarming, that employers need to know, and HR people, you need to know, most women will just leave. They'll just leave their job. You won't even know they're menopausal. They've just had enough.
Yeah.
And
or they'll leave and go and work for somebody else. And as we know, you know, it's very difficult to hire people, and retaining good people is incredibly hard. So there is a benefit to organizations and an economic cost to this as well. So let's have a chat about what is menopause, and we talked about perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, but also you can have surgical menopause as well. So there are other issues to think about.
Yes, I mean, typically you'll see, if you Google it, you'll see that the average age of a woman experiencing menopause in the UK is 51. That's what Google tells you. Now, it really does vary. And I talked about perimenopause, which is this lead up to our periods stopping, okay, because that's the only way really to explain it. And we're not menopausal. Let me just tell you what the word menopause means. And menopause itself happens on one day. It's one day. But we use menopause as a generic term now to explain, a woman going through perimenopause, then she'll be in menopause, which is that one day, which I'm going to explain when that one day is. And then after that one day, she's post-menopause. Now, we're post-menopause until the day we die. So we will always be post-menopause. Symptoms tend to tail off, women's bodies start to adjust, and I can come on to that a little bit later. But it is this transition from our reproductive state, so we talk about biology, into post-reproduction. We're born with all our eggs. And I'll come back to the chicken scenario, because honestly, it does. It won't surprise you that some people do believe that we continually produce eggs, and we don't. We're born with them. We're born with a set number, Each of us as a baby girl has anything from 1 million to 2 million. I don't know anybody who's actually counted them, and I think it varies from girl to girl, but somewhere between 1 million and 2 million eggs. And then as we grow and we move into puberty and our periods start, we start losing our eggs. So our eggs start disappearing, okay? They tail off then, and when we move into adulthood, this is really interesting. And those of you who are parents or want to be parents, or even those who don't want to be parents, by the time you're thinking about your fertility as a woman, you've probably got about 4% of your eggs left. That's it. This is really interesting, isn't it? Because actually our bodies are designed to have children in our teens, in our really young years. That's, you know, Mother Nature says that that's the best and that's our most fertile. And that's because we've got a really good chance of getting pregnant, because there are a lot of eggs there. So in adult years, it drops off to about 4%. And then we continue with our periods, we continue losing our eggs. And menopause comes about when actually our eggs start to run out and we're down to our last few. So the last period we have is likely to be the last egg. That's one way of looking at it. Menopause is seen clinically as women who have not had a period for 12 months and 1 day, and it's that 1 day that that dictates whether you're menopausal or not. Now that's what a textbook says. I do know women who can go 12 months without a period and then bang, it starts again. So it's not set in stone, and this is something that, you know, we have to think almost quite creatively when it comes to menopause, because everyone's menopause is different. Some women will have symptoms, other women won't experience any symptoms that they become aware of. Now, the women who say that they don't have any symptoms probably aren't very well educated, because there will be some symptoms, even if it's joint pain or maybe increase in headaches, but that she may not be associating that with her perimenopause or menopause. So this is why education is key too, because women do have to understand more about their own bodies. It will save them from some nasty symptoms, because there are certain things that we do to our own bodies which aren't good during menopause. One of them is drinking copious amounts of alcohol. We've got to stop that. That's not good. You know, changes to diet and lifestyle. Stress is really not good. And stress is a big trigger for symptoms, including panic attacks and increased anxiety, which is very common during menopause. So what's actually happening is, because the body is naturally, and I'm talking about natural menopause, if women through disease, ovarian failure, maybe after they've given birth, they may have to have a hysterectomy for whatever reason. Now, if you have a full hysterectomy and you have your ovaries removed, you're plunged immediately into menopause. So this may not be women that you're working with that are just going through natural menopause. There may well be somebody who's 28, okay, yeah, who's just had a hysterectomy, and I can tell you now, the aftercare is more concerned about the wound and the healing than it is about what's going to happen now post-menopause. And lots of women, it just hits them like a train. They have no idea that it's coming. No one's discussed it with them. It's quite disgraceful, actually, but they do need extra support. So that's what I would call surgical menopause, because they've been forced into it rather quickly, in fact, overnight. But natural menopause happens generally speaking, in our mid-40s. It starts with perimenopause, and then generally, and I am being very general because it changes for everybody, by the time we hit 52, 53, then we shouldn't be having our periods, and things will start to hopefully settle down. And certainly by the time we get to our mid to late 50s, things are starting to settle down for some women.
Yeah.
And that really depends largely on how they manage their own symptoms and their own health, because there are lots of factors that will create some of these troublesome symptoms that we're now going to go on to.
Yeah, and I think it's really important, isn't it? Because it's not just those physical symptoms that you've talked about. It's also the emotional impact, and I think, you know, the personal impact, and also the professional impact as well. So do you just some sort of, you know, information about those other sort of areas where maybe we don't often sort of focus on as well?
Yeah, well, psychology is my bag, really. Before menopause, I was an expert in the neck up. I'm a qualified advanced psychotherapist. I was in private practice for a long time and treated many women going through raised anxiety, as it does happen through perimenopause. Now, a lot of that raised anxiety, it is because the body's going through changes, and the brain is affected because obviously hormones are chemical messengers that come from the brain. Okay, they're produced in the pituitary gland, so you're going to have some movement there around the brain and emotions and thought, and this is why we focus quite a lot of our time on mental well-being, because you were talking earlier, you mentioned a statistic about the amount of women that are in the workforce between the ages of 45 and 54. I'm going to give you another frightening statistic, which I do think is very valid for companies to hear. And we're just doing some really good research on this, and we've got some articles coming out. Over the last 20 years, the suicide rate in women between the ages of 45 and 54, classically the perimenopause and menopausal years, has risen by 50%. Now, I know from my psychology days, you know, we were predicting the rise in suicide for both men and women, and we've seen that, and everyone is aware now, I think, that male suicide is the biggest killer for men under the age of 45, sadly. But there's a drop in male suicide. In female suicide, it's continuing to increase. Now, this is another reason why I do what I do, because we've got to start saving some of these women's lives. Some of the debilitating symptoms that will include this raised anxiety, where they'll be having panic attacks, heart palpitations, they'll think they're dying. Their confidence drops through the floor. Brain fog kicks in, they can't think clearly, lack of concentration. Now, a lot of this stems from other symptoms like lack of sleep, for example. And the significance between sleep and anxiety is very relevant, because the more anxious you are, the less you sleep. The less you sleep, the more anxious you become. And so you're on this, you know, Ferris wheel of anxiety and lack of sleep. And that's one of the biggest debilitating symptoms that has an impact on women in the workplace. And you will have seen as an employer over the last 18 months or so, where women have had the opportunity to work from home, perhaps, and it's been great for them. And this is something we need to be aware of as they move back into the workplace, because not everybody works in an office, I understand that, but wherever the workplace is, they've just had the comfort of being at home. They can take a loo break, they can go and get cool, they can position a fan, you know, open a window, keep their house cool, eat, keep their sugar levels up, so eat when they want to eat. You know, all those things are actually really good for a menopausal woman, because we just never know when symptoms are going to attack us, quite honestly. And if you're going through perimenopause, there will be times, and I've been told not to mention this to companies, and I don't know why, because I'm going to mention it now. There are times when periods are so irregular, women experience something called flooding. And the only way that I can describe this is it feels as if someone's murdering you, and it's like a bloodbath. And this can happen to women out of the blue, in the middle of, in fact, I spoke to somebody this week who said that it happened in the middle of a training session that she was delivering, and she had to leave the room very quickly. Now, I know that this is a very personal thing for women, I know that, but I think it's really relevant for colleagues to understand that it's not just about hot flushes, it's not just about moodiness, it's not just about headaches. It's about more than that. There are lots of other symptoms that will have an impact at work. So what I will say to an employer is, because you now know that that happens, okay, you don't need to talk to the woman about that. That's highly sensitive and it's very personal. But if she feels supported by you, that she can go into the ladies' loo and there is some sanitary wear there that she can access very quickly, that will make her feel as if you care about what's happening to her. And I've been in lots of offices and organisations where there is no sanitary wear in the, it should be. You're going to say something, Emma?
Yeah, no, I think that point you've raised there about returning to work and, you know, return to work plans. And I think that's really interesting with those organizations that are perhaps thinking about some sort of hot desking arrangements.
Yeah.
So, you know, you can, if you have your own space, you can have it set up how you want. If you need a fan, if you need your own sort of locker or desk or drawer that you can have, you know, your products in that you need. And I think with this idea of hot desking, I can see women sort of, you know, coming into the office with, you know, bags of stuff and a fan, and, you know, so I think that's quite an interesting one for businesses to think about, if, you know, with this return sort of a hybrid working, but this idea of hot desking.
Or cool desk.
Or cool desking, appropriate temperature desking.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, but I think that's quite an interesting one for employers, and I think I personally hadn't thought about that as well. I think we've all been thinking about other issues of, you know, returning to work and getting people back to work, and thinking about anxiety in a different way about being back to work and mixing with people. But actually, that point about, you know, I'm very anxious about how my symptoms, how I can manage them. I've had that comfort of being at home. And again, you know, how is that going to work, particularly if we're not going back into the environment we were before? We didn't have our own desk and we didn't have our own space. I think that's a really important point, really important point there. And I think, you know, what you said about, you know, confidence, I think, you know, that ability, you know, you feel, can I still do the job? Have I still got it? And I think they are really important things that, you know, I think you need to appreciate yourself, but also for employers to think about as well. So I know we've talked about some sort of, you know, facts, and I would love for you, please, to share the guinea pig story.
Oh, well, you know, we've been treated pretty badly throughout history as women in general, and I know it's starting to change. But you know, our hearts are all very heavy with this Sarah Everard, which, you know, has been on my mind actually all morning, because social media is full of it. So we're not still protected, are we? You know, but we have to learn how to protect ourselves, sadly. Now I know that's going off topic, but I'm just talking about women in general. Now that we have been treated badly, and more recently, we're all starting to live longer. Now, 1 in 7 of us are going to live until we're 100 years old. I absolutely fully intend to do that. I've got too much on my bucket list to get through over the next 50 years. So I know I'm still going to be kicking around. You know, I should be like Major Tom up and down on my Zimmer, probably at 100 and something. But going back a few years, we didn't. We were actually curling up our toes in our 50s. The average life expectancy in 1901 was 54. So, you know, bearing that in mind, I really need to get my skates on in terms of a bucket list if that was still the case. So you can see now why menopause is a relatively modern thing for us to be talking about, because we just didn't live that long. And if we did live that long, they did horrible things to us. In medieval times, we were probably burnt at the stake. I think I would have definitely been burnt at the stake. They would have thought I was completely mad. But that's what happened. You know, they just thought you were very witch-like and too knowing. You knew too many things, you'd be burnt at the stake. Skip forward to Victoriana. And those Victorian days, you know, most of the doctors, if not all, were men, not women, and they thought it was a really, really good idea because hysteria was incredibly linked to our womb. So they thought that we were hysterical when we were going through menopause, Of course, some women are, but a lot of it depends on how you're treated. And so they thought it was a great idea to feed us the juices of squeezed dead female guinea pigs. That just gives you an idea of, I mean, no wonder we all went mad. The other thing they used to do in Victorian times as well, which will probably make you wince and your eyes water, is that they used to use iron bars, iron rods. They used dry ice, because dry ice had just sort of, you know, it was a newly invented thing around that time. So they used to freeze these iron rods and then place them somewhere that we really don't want an iron rod placed.
Yes.
And they used to think that that would be a cure, because what you've got to remember is that menopause, you know, as you said, the word wasn't there. We were just, they thought that we had a disease. And women that weren't fertile anymore, you know, you were washed up and irrelevant, which sadly is still the case in modern times in some areas, in some people's thoughts, and in some countries. So yeah, they used to treat us incredibly badly. Times are changing, but they're not changing quickly enough, in my view. We've got to reduce the fear that women have about menopause. And I hear this all the time, women in their 30s and their early 40s, and even those in their mid and late 40s, women that are perhaps worried about owning up to hormonal changes. They don't want to talk about their own menopause because of the way that society might see them, see them as old. You know, we see it all the time, don't we? If they're in media, you know, if they're celebrities, you know, if their looks and their bodies matter more than anything else, they're not going to particularly want to stand up and say, I'm menopausal. And we want to change all that. And there are a few celebrities coming forward, of course, especially in the UK, but that's not the case everywhere. And it's still not the case in the UK. You know, it's a handful of celebrities who are selling books off the back of it and that sort of thing. But we want every woman to be able to say, I'm menopausal, that's great, or I'm menopausal, who cares, you know, rather than fear it. Education is key.
Well, it's interesting, and it's you know, research that actually menopause experts have done on legal cases, so employment tribunal cases that have been brought, which have cited menopause, and what we've seen is that in 2020 there were 16 employment tribunal cases that were brought which cited menopause, and that was an increase on 6 cases in 2019 and 5 in 2018. But if we take the statistics for 2021, so in the first 6 months of 2021 alone, 10 cases referenced menopause. So of course these figures are relatively low when we think about how many cases are brought for unfair dismissal, for example. But there is a significant increase. And I think, you know, this really does show employers that actually this is an issue and there are legal risks here. And, you know, it's about creating those inclusive, those understanding workplaces. So, you know, what are the risks and what are, you know, what are the cases that are being brought? Well, the first is disability discrimination, and as we know, disabilities are physical or mental impairments which have that substantial and long-term effect on your ability to carry out normal day-to-day activities, and that's normally a 12-month period or blocks of time which will add up to 12 months. And as we've heard from Dee, you know, these symptoms can last over a number of years. So employees, and there have been claims that have been brought by employees who've been able to successfully argue that the symptoms of menopause and perimenopause are disabilities. And obviously when we think about disability discrimination, we need to think not only about direct discrimination, indirect discrimination, but also that failure to make reasonable adjustments as well. So again, thinking about all those tips that we've already heard about and tips that we will hear about later. Other areas of risk, sex discrimination, but also age discrimination as well. And we mustn't forget, you know, harassment as well, creating those environments which are hostile or subjecting women to jokes because of their age or because of their menopause. But also it's about supporting our employees that are non-binary and trans employees as well. So it's discrimination, but also it's those other areas of risk as well. So we've talked about, grievances being raised, complaints being raised, employees, whether they leave or whether they resign and claim unfair dismissal, so constructive unfair dismissal. And there's a cost to litigation. There's a cost in terms of time, in terms of money. When we think about discrimination, there's that personal liability. So your managers can be held personally liable for acts of discrimination. There's also, the loss of reputation, staff retention, as we've heard, but also, making sure that we are that destination employer. And those that have heard me talk before, I've talked about, are we that employer of destination? Are we that place where people want to come and work, but also want to stay with us as well? So the topic of menopause, it's about supporting our employees, it's about awareness. And I really do think there is this growing trend that 2021 will again be a year where we will see more cases being brought where menopause is cited. So there is that huge impact on business as well, not just your people, but obviously on business. So Dee, against that sort of background of legal risk, what, thinking about the organisations that you work with, the people that you talk to, the employers that you talk to, what would be your key sort of top tips, your key takeaways?
Oh, yeah. Well, the first one is to allocate someone who's trained in menopause, who knows about menopause. Now, we offer free training, so this isn't going to cost your company a single penny. And it doesn't necessarily need to be an HR person. It could just be actually, you've got someone in your team who people tend to gravitate to. They love to speak to her on the coffee break or something like that. Give that power to someone. A listening ear is often what women need, and to talk to somebody who can understand. I talked about flooding, right? I'm not obsessed with it, but it is very valuable. She may not want to talk about that to anybody. That is incredibly sensitive. But, if as a woman, I know that there's someone that I can go to and actually say, this happened to me today, and I feel really embarrassed and I didn't know what to do. If that can be nipped in the bud on that day, because what employers need to recognise is women going through this change, this transition, they won't need your support 24/7. They're learning how to look after themselves. So we're not saying, I don't want anybody to have their head in their hands thinking, oh my goodness, we're going to have to watch this woman like a hawk. We've got to do this, we've got to do that. That's not the case at all. There will just be times like she's had a terrible night's sleep and she rings up. Okay. Now, what's happening at the moment? She's having a terrible night's sleep. She rings in sick. That's what's happening. So you're losing millions of pounds worth in productivity. Yeah. So you've got to prevent that. So what she could do is she could ring up and speak to the person who's educated in menopause. Okay, your menopause is like having a first aider, right? So
champion, a menopause champion.
Yeah, your menopause champion. She would ring up and not hesitate, but to have a conversation with her and say, I had the worst night last night. It was really terrible. I think I've only had about 2 hours sleep. Would it be possible for me to work from home today, just to catch up this morning with my sleep, and then work later? So that actually, same productivity, but she's working into the early evening. That sort of attention to detail will make all the difference. And you know what? What you'll find is the more support that you put into the workplace, the less symptoms will be problematic for that team member, honestly, because anxiety and lack of confidence comes from lack of support and lack of understanding. It gets worse.
Yeah.
So, as soon as you start putting these things into place, women start to naturally feel much more relaxed and much better, and then brain fog starts disappearing.
I think you're right, and I think the message certainly in the sort of in the legal training is very much being that proactive manager, knowing your people, knowing your teams, being able to spot signs early, whatever that might be, an issue at home, health, and being able to deal with that rather than letting it fester, rather than getting to the point where you've got an employee who's then going off on long-term sickness absence until you get a grievance, a complaint, and you end up in a tribunal. So it's about being, rather than being the firefighter, the reactionary manager, the reactionary employer, what can we do to make people, and to make people, as you said, sort of feel empowered as well, that, it's okay to want to sort of, start work a little bit later, or it's okay to kind of need to, go home at lunchtime, or whatever it might be. And I think there's that balance, isn't there, from being, very supportive and creating those inclusive, inclusive work spaces as well. I think the other point we've got there on the slide is that, symptoms can often mask other issues as well. So, encouraging women to, seek advice. If you've got employee assistance programs, that's a really good way of offering support to your people, or, websites, support from menopause experts as well. And I think, really that training and that awareness, isn't it? It's, is really kind of key.
Definitely. And you may have, you may have a younger member of the team, maybe in her late 30s, who's experiencing some symptoms, but she's not sure if she's perimenopausal or not.
Yes.
She's more likely, then you're nipping things in the bud, aren't you? And you're signposting someone. You're really helping them, because she's more likely to go and speak to that person who's been menopause trained, and has that knowledge for that menopause first aider, so to speak, to then say, look, there's some free training here. I suggest you do it and see if you recognise, because women get light bulb moments when they're doing the training. It says, oh, that's why I feel like that, or that's what's going on, or yes, I am definitely perimenopausal. There's lots of things they don't know. So if we can catch women early and educate them quicker, you're saving yourself a whole lot of problems further down the line.
And on that point, Dee, just tell us what menopause experts can do and how it can help and support employers and employees.
Well, we have we have a website that's packed full of information. So that's menopauseexperts.com.
It's great, by the way. Definitely recommend, and I'll be sending that out. The diet, particularly how the information you've got on there about what foods you should be eating, supplements, really helpful information. I definitely recommend people check that out.
Thank you. And this is, we're encouraging women to take charge of themselves. Okay. Now, when you're an employer, of course, you have a duty of care over all your employees. But the more we can encourage anyone, not just women, but the more we can encourage people to take charge of their own health, understand their own health. As I say, we've got an NHS that's absolutely burdened. We've got GPs leaving the profession left, right, and centre, nurses leaving. Goodness only knows what's happening after the pandemic. I think there'll just be, this mass exodus. We've all got to start to understand our health better and put less strain on healthcare, on the healthcare profession. And that starts with knowledge, whether it's trying to make sure that you don't fall into diabetes, for example, things like that. So just talking about health in general, and especially women's health, learn, read things, find out things. And so our website is packed full of really useful blogs and information. We have a regular quarterly, very glossy digital magazine, which is we've even got a comedian that writes for us about some of the issues that we experience through menopause, just looking at the light side of it. But it's also packed with recipes and information on health, and that's free of charge to everybody, and that can be rolled out within your organization. Some of the things that we offer free, like the free training, which is accessible to everyone, not just women.
Men as well.
We have a separate training for men as well, Now, you've got to invest time in it, because for the women, it's about 16 hours of information. But trust me, when you've done it, you'll become your own menopause expert. You know, you'll start to understand yourself or your mother or your sister or your colleagues or whatever much, much better. And that's completely free of charge. Now, you can sign up for the training through the website. You'll see free training. It's fairly obvious. And we're interested to work with lots of companies, as I am at the moment, helping them put their menopause policy together, because by introducing all these services that we provide, you're actually making your policy support, it just makes it much, much more robust. And you're less likely then for one of your team members to say, you didn't take me seriously. I tried to talk to somebody about my menopause and no one was listening to me. And, you know, I've had enough now, and see you in court. You really don't want that at all. So all these things are there as resources that are free of charge. You have to pay for a policy, of course, but it's little investment for what you're actually going to get back.
Difference. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that training and awareness piece, from, you know, my perspective, you know, that really does make a difference, and, you know, cascading that information down. So just before I asked Aoife her final thoughts, I just wanted to share with you some of the upcoming training and events that we've got in the HR Training Academy. Just a couple of events to flag to you. On the 19th of October, I'm going to be running a virtual training session where we're focusing on how we manage flexible working requests. Employers are seeing them, they're coming through. So how are we going to manage them, and how are we going to rank requests if we get several in one team? So do sign up and do join us for that. And also on the 4th of November, I'm going to be hosting a virtual talk, where we look at, you know, those issues about returning to work, the sort of the changing gears, and how we can support ourselves, support our colleagues, support our teams. And that's with Geraldine Jerikin of Mind Your Business. So look out for that and sign up for that. That will be with a live Q&A as well. So look out for that. And then we've got our webinar program as well. So again, I'll be sending out details of that after the session. So Dee, October is tomorrow, and October is is Menopause Month, and then the 18th of October is World Menopause Day. So there's a real opportunity, I think, for employers to get involved in this topic. But what would be your sort of final thoughts?
Well, what we can do for you as a company, and we'd love to work with any company, large or small. As I say, you can sign up for the training, but we also provide something which is under license, so you can actually run workshops internally. That's something that's really interesting. They can be regular workshops, they can do them one-to-one, they can be virtual. It's using all our material, which will always be updated when there's new research. So it's a valuable resource to tap into us, because we live, sleep, eat, breathe menopause. Okay. So quite often don't try and do it yourself unless you really know your stuff. Use us, because we're really we're there for you. And if you start working with us, we will openly mention you as proud to be working with you, and we'll also give you a badge, you know, a badge of glory that you can put on your website, you can put on your HR material, you can put it wherever you want. And it basically shows that you are supporting, it's menopause experts, and you've been awarded and you're supporting women. So it's a badge of honour, which goes down rather nicely and shows your employees that you're taking it seriously. So we can do that for you as well. And anyone who wants to talk to me, just drop me an email. It's dww@menopauseexperts.com. Email me anytime, and let's take it from there and see what we can do together to support these women.
Absolutely. We have had the most amazing comments, Dee. You know, such a useful webinar. Thank you so much. So important to be having conversations like this. We will be recording, you know, we've recorded this, so you will be able to watch it again on YouTube and share it with your colleagues. And I'll be sending out details afterwards for you to contact Dee, and obviously how you can get involved with menopause experts. I've been overwhelmed actually with the numbers of people that we've had on the webinar today. It's just brilliant, and it's been so great to be able to discuss this topic and not be discussing a legal topic, which is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So I'd just like to thank Dee so much for joining us today. Great webinar, many thanks Dee, and brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to make sure that Kerry records these comments, and I'm going to send them to Dee because they are absolutely wonderful. So thank you so much, Dee, for joining us. You are, well, you're very lucky because you are at lunchtime now, aren't you? You're
yes, my tummy is rumbling. My tummy is rumbling. I hope my microphone isn't that sensitive. And I'd love to come back and talk about another subject, which I'm sure that there'll be a few ears prick up at this, and that is andropause. That is the male menopause. Okay,
oh, wow.
So watch this space.
Watch this space, definitely. Watch this space. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who's joined us today for all your lovely comments and questions. I'll be passing those through to Dee, and looking forward to seeing you at one of our training events or our webinar next month. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and have a lovely rest of the day. Thank you very much.